on this now from AlJazeera's Ayman Mohyeldin, who is also in Cairo and joins us now live. Ayman, former member of the regime, going on trial there in Cairo, but people say that he's not facing the right charges.
That's correct. In fact, you know, when you look at the track record of Habib al-Adli, in the eyes of many ordinary Egyptians, he was a strong man of the regime, and certainly not only involved in what may appear to be money laundering or profiteering, but certainly in many of the strong tactics and brutal use of force that the Ministry of Interior forces here had become to symbolize in the eyes of ordinary Egyptians. And so many people were hoping that he would be put on trial for charges of torture, charges of being involved or perhaps ordering the use of live ammunition against the protesters on January the 25th and the 28th, which led to at least 600 or so, by some estimates, Egyptians being killed. But from the eyes of those prosecuting the former Minister of Interior, they make the argument that you have to go after the cases which have the most readily available evidence. And in this case, it seems that the prosecutors believe they can build a strong case based on money laundering and profiteering. With the paper trail that they have, it may be difficult for them to prove the orders that he gave involving the attacks on January the 25th and January 28th.
Given that this trial is beginning in this interim period, just a few weeks after the regime fell, and the strength of feeling, can a fair trial be guaranteed?
Well, many people are going to be watching very closely, you know, on many different levels. First of all, Egypt's constitution, as we know, has been suspended, and certainly it has made it a little bit difficult for so many of those involved in gathering the evidence, perhaps to interview some of these high-ranking officials, perhaps those involved in the police under the Minister of Interior. So there are those who may be watching this from a legal point of view and question whether or not he and other individuals could have been brought to justice so quickly following the collapse of the regime. Others argue that these individuals have for years been known to the regime as being involved in illegal activity. The evidence is there, it's just that there was a lack of will to prosecute them. So perhaps now, in an atmosphere of transparency, these cases can be brought openly. What is going to be a real test, Egypt's judiciary is going to have to deal with the judges involved, the prosecutors involved. Would they be given same access to evidence and, you know, cross-examining of witnesses? And I think all of that will be played out in the coming weeks, depending on the type of judicial environment created inside that courtroom.
Ayman, many thanks. Ayman Mohyeldin there, live in Cairo. Saudi Arabia has banned all demonstrations after a series of minor protests in the oil-producing eastern province. Mainly Shia protesters gathered in the towns of Qatif and Hofuf on Thursday and Friday. They've been demanding the release of all prisoners without being held without trial, as well as better access to jobs. Authorities say that the security forces will stop at nothing to quell unrest. And after days of violent unrest, Oman's Sultan Qaboos has replaced two of his cabinet ministers. That's according to state media. Protesters there have been calling for more jobs and better political representation. Meanwhile, workers have been staging a sit-in at the main oil field in Haima to demand more state investments. Let's get more on the protests that have been gripping the Gulf. I'm joined now by Ghanim Al-Najjar, who's a professor of political science at Kuwait University. Thanks for being with us. So let's talk about today's developments, first of all, starting with that news in Saudi Arabia. Not only have security forces been mobilized, but now there's an outright ban on any kind of protest.
Well, this is only natural. I think what's happening now in the Gulf is only a reaction and reflection of what's happening around the area, and it was understandable that something like that to happen in Bahrain, and then Oman, then Saudi. Things were going, the dynamics. Maybe each country is different, but dynamics are the same. People are not just demanding economic rights or better jobs or better living conditions. This is a matter that needs for the political spectrum to be expanded. You need to have more freedom of speech and opening up in the system, and that's the right time for this for all the governments in the Gulf to intervene and try to to comply with what's happening in the area, in the region, and in their specific countries.
Do you think, therefore, that Saudi Arabia's move in particular will be seen as inflammatory, that it will simply add fuel to the fire and make people angrier?
In what sense? I mean, why Saudi Arabia?
Well, to ban people from holding demonstrations, to
Well, yeah,
mobilize the security forces?
I think there is a room to maneuver for Saudi Arabia. They have a major problem in Jeddah with the flooding, which would cause also other problems over there. And I think it's opening up, allowing people also to go in the streets. These are rights enshrined in all international treaties for human rights that some of them the Saudi government also is party to. This is a possibility, and if they don't really go into the one step further to understand what's going on and opening up, the situation might have a different effect.
What about the situation in Oman and Bahrain? Are they similar to the situation in Saudi Arabia, or very different?
No, they are different. You know, Oman and Bahrain, they are less in terms of financial resources and less in terms of living conditions. So they will not be able to pump as much money into their economic infrastructure and economic system. And that's why the richer Arab Gulf countries decided to pump some $1 or $2 billion into these two countries. But these are totally different. And Oman is different, and Bahrain different. There is the sectarian issue in Bahrain, which is also causing some delay in realizing the results of the movement and the demonstrations. However, we had the last demonstration was the biggest one, which was called on by the six political parties. In Bahrain, the political system and the political atmosphere and the political infrastructure of the political groups are much mature than the ones in Oman, yet the Omani situation also could develop, and that's the reason why the Sultan Qaboos have agreed at least to make some gestures by removing some of his top officials, just to say that I understand and we will try to correct some mistakes.
So thank you very much indeed, Professor Ghanim Al-Najjar, Professor of Political Science at Kuwait University. Now to Somalia, where government forces have retaken a border town from al-Shabaab fighters. A spokesman for the government says that his forces are now in control of Beled Hawa on the Kenyan border after hours of heavy gunfire. Meanwhile, fighting in the capital Mogadishu has reportedly injured dozens of people. More than 50 African Union peacekeepers are reported to have been killed in the unrest in the last 2 weeks alone. Power and water have been restored to rebel-held regions in the north of Côte d'Ivoire. Utilities had been cut off for a week during clashes between supporters of incumbent President Laurent Gbagbo and his opponent Alassane Ouattara. Some of the fiercest fighting happened in a suburb of Abidjan on Thursday, where at least 6 female demonstrators were killed. Meanwhile, the chairman of the African Union is in Côte d'Ivoire to help mediate the leadership struggle there. AlJazeera's Mohamed Ado is live for us in Abidjan. What's happening in those discussions, Mohamed?